Well, hello everyone, Karen Eiton here. I'm excited to be here. Today I'm going to be giving you 40 secrets that every sewing business should know. So these are some of my own secrets, some of my own things that I use personally in my sewing shop. So you may want to take out a pen and paper and go ahead and write some of these. I don't know how slow I'll go because I don't want to have the video too long for you, but we're going to go ahead and hop on in. If some of you out there may know who I am, some may not. And anyway, I am Karen Eiton, and I am a business coach, a small business coach, and I also help sewing shops to be able to market themselves and to be able to promote and to drive traffic on the web and to be able to start earning the income that they deserve. So a lot of women out there, and men too for that matter, have little sewing shops and from home, and they don't really know how to make it all that it can be, right? To really research what they're doing and to be able to make it a profitable business. So I help people with that. So you can reach out to me at any time, and I would love to talk to you. And also in the description, I will put my link to book a call, free call with me, a discovery call. If you go to my booking page, you'll see that I have where I do alterations. I run an alteration business, and I also on that page on my calendar, I have where people can book an alteration appointment with me, in person at my shop. So that's for the tailored wedding. And then I also have where you can go there and book a discovery call with me, where I call you and we can talk on either Zoom, or if you live out of the country, we can talk on Zoom. If you have that app, we can talk on Hangouts, we can talk on Facebook Messenger, whatever it is. But anyway, we can get a hold of each other and to be able to talk about your business and where you feel you're stuck or where you feel you need help, right? And that's what coaches do. They help you out of the spot that you're in and to be able to be successful. So anyway, we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm so excited for this. It's going to be a little bit of a long video, so prepare yourself. Kick your shoes off, sit back, and just take notes or listen or whatever you want to do, right? So here we go. So number one on our 40 secrets that every sewing business should know is universal needles. So if you purchase universal needles for your commercial machine, 80-12 or a 90-14, when you're tired of changing needles all the time, right? I use a universal needle in my sewing machine, and I use it for most fabrics. Rarely do I have to change the needle for different types of fabrics. A universal needle is maybe something that can help you so you don't have to constantly change needles. So in it sews, the universal needle sews most woven and knit fabrics and many other fabrics in between. So number two, I'm going to mark these off as I go so I don't over repeat. Since there's 40 of them, I want to kind of stay on track here. Number two is to use tissue paper on the bottom of hard to sew fabrics to guide it through your machine better. Then peel off the paper afterwards. Number three, use a large eye needle for button thread. So a lot of times people try to use regular home sewing thread to sew their buttons on, and they realize that the button is not going to stay on, right? So you want to be able to use a larger, coarser thread for button thread. There's a regular button thread out there. It's already pre-waxed usually, and then you can wax it again to really make the button stay. So that's number three. Number four, use beeswax on your button thread to keep it from tangling when you go to sew. Number five, you can adjust your bobbin thread tension by using the small screw on the bobbin case, unscrew to loosen, and then you can also screw it to tighten. Number six, use stitch witchery to hold patches in place before sewing. Number seven, use a large mug for sewing with thread spools, cones, if you don't have a thread stand. So you can put the mug close to the back of your machine or the side of your machine where the thread can go up and still go, and you can thread the cone to your machine if you don't have a cone thread stand, right? Number 8. Use paper binder clips to hold your quilt binding on while you sew it. Number 9. Clip your corners of piping to have smooth corners. You know, piping is, you know, you have the rolled part of the piping where you sew it, right? And then you also have the little piece of material that's on the edge. Cut the piece of material, notch it out when you turn your corners. They'll be much smoother. Number 10, baste a rolled hem in place before actually sewing it. So baste it in place. You get a much nicer hem. If you're not doing it, you know, if you're not used to doing it without pins, like I can do a rolled hem and I don't need to pin it. I can just run with it. But if you're not experienced enough and you're sitting there pinning it all the time, it's better to just go ahead and take a quick running stitch and to stitch it with basting thread, and then that you can just break and pull out as you after you sew it. Number 12, make a flat fabric pin cushion for the front of your machine to put pins and needles back as you take them out of what it is you're sewing, and then you can put them into where you're sitting there, right there on the front of your machine. Use a pin cushion. Number 13, when you pin hems in for fabric together, make sure to have your pin heads facing the right of the fabric. So a lot of times when, you know, beginners or new, you know, people that are just starting to sew, they'll pin any which way. And then when you get to the machine, you've got pins on this side and you want them on this other side, the pin heads on this other side, on the right-hand side of your fold of whatever it is you're pinning. So that way you can just pull them out as you sew, right? You can just run your stitching and pull it out. Otherwise, you have to try to take them out on the other side, and it's a little bit harder and slows your sewing time down. Number 14, wind plenty of bobbins, the colors that you're going to use ahead of time for your project that you're going to work on. So a lot of times I will run, you know, 2 or 3 bobbins if I have a big project. Say I'm making a slipcover or I'm making something that is large project, right? And I know I'm going to have a lot of sewing involved. So instead of just waiting for every bobbin to wind as I go, I will, you know, rewind, you know, wind, you know, 3 bobbins at least, and have those. So, and then also wind bobbins as I am sewing, you know, on my bobbin winder. This way, in case something happens, one of the bobbins turns out loose or it turns out funky or whatever, you'll always have a bobbin to finish that project and won't slow you down as much. Number 15, use small hand sewing needles for small stitches and long needles for longer basting stitches. Number 16, when you get better at sewing, pinning is not necessary. Very true. Sometimes you don't have to pin at all when you are experienced. 17, press your fold lines in before you sew. Get you a much sharper, you know, hem line. So if you're sewing something and you have a rolled hem, sometimes if you'll just go to the iron and you will press it in, that's all you need to do, and you don't even need to pin it. Just press it in, and then as you sew, it will just glide so much better for you. Number 18, reduce your seam allowances for collars and curved garment pieces that you're sewing. So for when you sew on a collar and it's got a lot of curve to it, if you sew a little bit closer to the edge, you won't need to clip the edges as much, or maybe not at all. So it just depends on how much seam allowance you're leaving on some of the different curves. And if you cut out some of that, you know, you sew just a smaller seam allowance, you won't have to clip it. Number 19, use fabric weights to hold patterns down on your fabric instead of pins. And then number 20 is use a plastic square bread tie to mark stitching lines on to use for hand sewing to make all your stitches uniform, especially for top stitching. You know those little square bag little clips that they have on bread? It's like a little tiny square, and it's got a circle, and then it holds the bread tight, you know, the end of the bread bag tight. Those little things. If you take a permanent marker and you write on there and measure, you write one line, draw one line, and then another line for 1/4 of an inch, for 1/2 inch, for 3/8, whatever your hand sewing stitches you want them to be. And then you use that and you hold that in your hand as along your hemline or whatever it is you're top stitching or what have you, and you match that same space, and then all of your stitching will be uniform as you stitch. Number 21, sew fabric scrap squares on the end of your elastic where it overlaps. So you know sometimes where the elastic overlaps in a waistband or something like that, and you know you can see that the elastic eventually will unravel, right? So if you would go ahead and sew a square of regular, you know, a scrap piece of fabric on that area, that would keep it from coming apart and unraveling. Okay, 22. Iron interfacing to the back of your patterns to keep them longer. So if you're using a sewing pattern, you know, your commercial patterns or whatever, if you're using some of those, and you find that they're like falling apart or they're getting ripped really easily, you can iron interfacing on the back of them to kind of sturdy them up a little bit. 23. When cutting slippery fabric, you can put a layer of muslin on the bottom and then cut a slippery fabric. It stays in place better. So, you know, if you're cutting silk, satin, a lot of that stuff is really slippery, right? So if you would take a piece of muslin and put it down first and then put your fabric on top of it and then pin the two together, and then when you're cutting that top layer that is the silk or the satin, the muslin kind of acts as an interfacing and it stiffens it up so you can cut a much straighter line and things. So you can do that. Number 24 is to use a pressing cloth on light colored fabrics. You will learn the hard way if you don't already use a pressing cloth on whites, cream colors, really pale colored fabrics. A pressing cloth is essential. Number 25. When using metallic thread, use 2 threads. Use a regular thread also and thread the needle with both threads. Metallic thread is very thin. It breaks really easy. So if you use another thread with it, along with it, it will kind of strengthen it up and it will, you know, sew a lot better. Number 26, cut a tape measure and clear tape it onto the front of your sewing machine or cutting table. It comes in so handy when you're sitting at the machine and you already have a tape going along the front of your machine, you know, the side edge of it. And it just, you know, it comes in so handy when you're sitting there and you want to measure something out. You know, for lengthwise, like maybe cutting a piece of elastic or just all kinds of different things. And then number 27. When sewing fabric that is hard to determine which side is the right side, put a safety pin on the right side of your cutout pattern pieces. This is what I do. I put a large safety pin on the front, so I know what is the front, what is the wrong side, right? So when you go to sew it, you make sure. These are for fabrics that are really hard to tell what is the front and what is the back. And then number 28, use rectangle cardboard to wrap your fabric around to keep and store your stash of fabric. That's what I do. Number 29, color code your thread supply to find thread colors faster. That's what I do. I try to put all my black thread and navy blue thread together in one area. I try to put my whites and cream colors in one area, then my pinks, then my yellows, things like that. You can find it a lot better. Number 30. Excuse me 1 second, I take a drink. I'm getting thirsty. That's a whole lot of talking. Number 30, store extra buttons in So store extra buttons in mason jars. That's what I do. And then 31, use a Q-tip to clean out your bobbin case and machine throat plate. That's what I do. 32, use a large safety pin to pull elastic through. Yep. And 32 is use an invisible zipper for installing invisible zippers. So sometimes people try to sew on an invisible zipper with a regular foot, and it's a little bit difficult. It's a little, you don't get close enough to the actual teeth of the zipper, and it looks like a shoddy job. So make sure that you do use an invisible zipper foot for installing invisible zippers. 33, use a wooden chopstick for turning corners to the right side. Works great. 34, tie a scrap fabric to your sewing scissors so no one uses them for anything but fabric. Excellent idea. 35, always having a 6-foot ruler at your machine is very helpful. Yes, I always have a wooden 6-inch ruler on my machine. 36, test your straight pins in knits, silks, and satin fabrics before you use them to pin patterns or do fittings. So sometimes these pins that we've been buying lately, you may buy them at a craft store, you may buy them at a regular fabric store, but a lot of them are good for crafts, but they are not good for fine knits or fine fabrics. So you want to make sure that you have a really nice straight pin when you go to start doing fittings, so you don't snag people's garments or the fabrics. Very important. Let's see. 37. When you put your pins in your machine, pin cushion, like I was telling you to make a pin cushion for the front of your machine. When you put the pins in your machine pin cushion, put the pins up and down position. That's what I do. So a lot of times your needles will get lost inside that pin cushion if you don't have it some sort of in order or know what you do. So when I put my pins in there, I put my pins in a down position on the pin cushion, or I put them in the up position, usually towards the left-hand side. And then when I use my pins, I like to put my pins going sideways, That way I can tell where my pins are and where my needles are when I go to get them in a hurry, right? Kind of organizes your pin cushion so you know exactly where your things are. Number 38, use a rectangle piece of scrap fabric at the end of your zippers when sewing in purses and in bags and, other things too. When you're putting any kind of a zipper, inserting it, you want to make sure that you use a little scrap of fabric before to hold the two pieces together before the zipper pull and after at the zipper stop. It helps keep those things together. And 39, keep a garbage can under your sewing machine area, under your sewing machine and your cutting area to keep your shop tidy. And number 40, pre-wash all cotton fabrics before you sew them and cut them out into something. I'm going to give you one more for a bonus. Number 41, bonus time. When cutting a pattern, cut the notches going towards the outside instead of cutting it into the fabric portion. Because a lot of times I'm seeing people do demonstrations on YouTube. They're doing demonstrations on how to cut out a pattern. And let me just show you for an example. I can write it, draw it maybe. So a lot of times you'll have like a line here, your cutting line, right? And it'll have this little notch going like this, right? It'll have a little notch like that, right? So here's your cutting line. This is your cutting line. And it'll have, okay, where this is your notch, right? So a lot of people are cutting this notch out like this. They're cutting into, this is your pattern piece right here. Say this is your, I don't know what, but, say this is your shirt pattern, right? And they're cutting the notch in to the garment. And this is your stitch line, okay? So when they're cutting in notches, they're going in here like this. they're taking that chunk out of there, and you have just this little bit of seam that you're going to sew right here, and you're going to be, your notch cut out right here is going to be so close to your stitching line, it's going to come apart. So when you do your notches, when you see that like that, cut this way. Cut, oh, I can't, I'm trying to do this. So cut your notch out, you know, out into the extra fabric. Cut it out here, your notch. So you're not going into your stitching line, right? You cut out and then down, okay? So that was 40. So that was 40 sewing secrets that every sewing business should know. So thank you so much. I'm Karen Eiton. I'm a business coach. I'd love to help you out. And go ahead and like this video if you like it. I hope you'll give me the thumbs up on these secrets, and I hope that you will subscribe to this channel for more and more good information about sewing and business and things like that. So please go ahead and subscribe. I need my numbers to get up there. I need my algorithm to keep going, and you would really, really help me out, and I would so much appreciate it. All right? So thanks so much, and I look forward to talking to you all in the next video. Bye-bye now.